Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Crafting and Crime Daily, the show where I recap live trials. So, as you know, yesterday was President's Day. There was no trials yesterday. So, I'm going to give you a true crime story. We're going to talk about the case of the disappearance of Lisa Spence. We're going back to Florida. You know how much I love Florida. They have the best crime there. Anyway, the weirdest things happen in Florida. So Lisa Spence, she was a 35-year-old woman who had moved to Florida from Trinidad. She had grown up in Trinidad. She had 6 brothers and sisters. She was like the middle child of all those. Growing up, she graduated high school. After high school, she went right to work. She had her daughter when she was 17. So by the time she leaves to go to Florida, her daughter is 17 years old and her son is 13. So she has the daughter by one man. 5 years later, she has her son by another man. And then many years after that, she meets a guy named Paul Edwards. So she and Paul have this on again, off again, very rocky relationship. Many of her friends say that she was abused by Paul. And, you know, he would abuse her, and then afterward they would break up, and then afterwards he'd woo her and buy her flowers and all kinds of things, and they'd get back together. You know, he'd apologize. Oh, it's never going to happen again, and they would get back together. So finally, one day she just ends it for good. And then Paul, who also had a couple of children by a couple of different women, he ends up going back to one of those women, and they pack up and move to Florida, South Florida. Now, while he was in Trinidad, Paul had been a corrections officer in the prison system over there. So he comes over to Florida. He gets a job. Oh, I don't remember what his job was. Not corrections, but he gets a job. 6 months after they move here, he and baby mama, they break up. So Paul turns his attention back to Lisa, who by now has gotten a really well-paying job in Trinidad and is supporting her family, and everything's going well. So he keeps calling her and saying, hey, come to Florida. It's the land of opportunity. You'll be really happy here. You can raise money. We'll raise money. We'll bring the kids over. We'll get married. And she fell for it, lock, stock, and barrel. I need some coffee. Yeah, poor Lisa. So she comes to Florida, and they're there for, I don't know what year she came to Florida, but they're together for some time. She moves into this apartment. It's a really small apartment in Miramar, Florida, out near this. It's right behind this little strip mall that's across the street from North Perry Airport. I remember all these places because I used to live in that area. So just a little strip mall, maybe parking lot holds about 30 cars. There was a quick stop there, like a 7-Eleven, convenience store there. And then right next to that was a place called Bella Beauty Supply. Now, they were both owned by the same person, Mohammed something or other, an Indian guy. So he owns both of those places. So Lisa gets a job. A job. He didn't officially hire her. She would come in and work, and he would pay her. Nothing on the books. But nonetheless, she would work several days a week, Fridays and Saturdays at the Bella Beauty place, and then she would work 4-hour shifts at the Quick Stop. So a lot of people got to know her because she worked at the Quick Stop. And she was a very reliable employee. She never would, if she wasn't going to be there, she would call the owner, and he would, make sure the place was covered. She was a cashier when she worked at the Quick Stop. She was also known by a lot of police who would frequent this store. And she was said to be a very, very beautiful woman. 5'6", brown eyes, long brown hair, very, very stunningly beautiful woman. So she leaves behind her kids in Trinidad. She leaves them with the family, and she's planning on, bringing them over. Now she calls them regularly. She spends $10 a day at least on long distance phone call cards so she can call her kids in Trinidad. So she's in touch with them all the time. Daughter's name was Serlene. She was about to turn 18. So mom and her were talking regularly. So it was during the shift on October 7th that she takes a break, and calls her daughter, Serlene. And she tells her, I'm just on a quick break and I'm going to call you back after I leave work. She never calls her back. And by 11 p.m., still no return call. Serlene, and I learned later on from the owner that she had worked the shift from 6 to 10 that night, 4-hour shift. So she gets off at 10. When Serlene doesn't hear from her by 11, she starts calling her mom. No answer. Calls several times, no answer. She leaves messages. She wakes up the next morning. She cries again, no answer. So Serlene goes to her family and she says, hey, this is not like mom. This is very unusual. I think something's wrong. So the family calls Serlene's sister-in-law, who lives in Philadelphia. She has a brother that's an older brother who already lives in the U.S. He's in Philadelphia. So she calls her sister-in-law and says, hey, can you check on this for us and see what's going on? So the sister-in-law calls the police, and she only knows, the address. She knows where Serlene is and where she works. And they call several different agencies till they get the right agency, the Miramar Police Department. So they finally get the police officer at the Miramar Police Department on the phone, and she starts describing her sister, and she's like, this is Sunday now, Sunday. She hasn't been seen since Wednesday. So on Sunday, she's talking to this officer, and she's describing her sister, and she says, she works at the Quick Stop, and he's like, hey, I know your sister. I go there all the time. Several officers knew her sister. So they start this investigation and try to find Lisa. So the officers interview a guy named Richard Moore, who would hang out at the Quick Stop. He was a friend of Lisa's, and he said he was friends with the owner, and when Lisa was working, he would just kind of hang out there because they were friends, and he didn't want anything to happen to her, because these aren't the safest places to work in the world. So he said they would regularly text back and forth, and he said that he was there that night till about 7:30 p.m. And then he said there was another guy that came in, and he says, okay, someone else is here. I'm going to go ahead and leave now. So, but he thought the text was a little unusual because it just didn't sound like her. Okay. So he calls her around Thursday that afternoon, and he says, hey, are you okay? Because apparently the next morning she was supposed to work a shift at the Bella Beauty Supply. She doesn't show up. Nobody hears from her. No one, she doesn't call in to work. So he calls her around 4 o'clock. Are you okay? Hey, call me back. He gets a text back from her about 5:30 that says, and he had said, I'm worried about you. So he gets a text back from her that says, as soon as I get settled in, I'll give you a call. Now, he said she used some other word, but he couldn't remember what the word was, and he had already deleted the text. So he did, after that text, he tries to call her several more times and leaves messages, and she never answers. And she never texted him after that. So, where are we? Let's see. More coffee. Okay. So, police find out that, where she lives, and they go to she was living with Paul. His last name was Edwards. Paul Edwards. They go to his apartment, and they said, we're just here to do a welfare check on Lisa. That's what they were there. They were just going to do a welfare check. And he lets them in, and it's a really, really tiny apartment. Like, you walk in and the living room, you're walking into the living room, the kitchen's right there, there's a bedroom and a bathroom. That's the whole apartment. You can walk through it in a matter of minutes. So he lets them, they walk through, she's not there, and he says that she just left. She left. They had an argument. She said, "I'm breaking up with you," and she left. So they thought his demeanor, he was very nervous acting, which that's not unusual. People don't like when police come to your home. Very nervous, but his answers didn't add up. It was very strange because she didn't have a car. How did she take all her things and leave? Where was she going? He had no idea where she was, no forwarding address, no belongings left. All the belongings were gone. So they go back a couple days later to ask some more questions. And what he says is they actually go to his mother's house because Paul stayed sometimes at his mother's house. So they go find Paul at his mother's house and say, "Hey, can you come down to the police station? We want to interview you." And he's like, "Sure." And he goes down to the police station and he explains to them that he had some cuts on his hand. And they're like, "Well, how'd you get those cuts on your hand?" And he says, well, Lisa and I got into this fight several days before she disappeared, and she'd pulled a knife out on me, and which could terribly, listen, I've represented people from the Caribbeans, and they don't play. I had one guy that was chasing his girlfriend around with a machete. I'm like, "Why would you have a machete in your kitchen?" I was like, "We all do." And I'm like, "Why?" But okay. So she gets a knife out, and he's trying to take the knife away from her. That's how he got his cuts. Now, it turns out he tells some other friends that he got those cuts because he was making chicken, and he cut himself making chicken. I don't know who does that. You'd get such a horrible infection from the chicken. No. Anyway, so she said, I'm breaking up with you. I'm going to leave. So he says, "You need time to think. I'm going to get in the car. I'm going to go for a drive and give you time to think." So he leaves. He comes back a few hours later. She's gone. All her stuff is gone. She's gone. Yeah. She didn't have a car. Where'd she go? So, yeah. Okay. So he said they also fought the night. Yeah. So they fought a few days before she disappeared. That's when the knife came out. But they also fought the night she disappeared. When she got off of work, she came home. They fought. That's when he drove around and came back and she was gone. So, and he said he hadn't seen or heard from her since then. So she had told friends that she was very scared of Paul and that he was abusing her and that she had plans to leave. She had a bag packed. She was just trying to wait for the right time to leave him. She said he was always calling in sick to work, so he was always around, and it just never was the right time. But apparently she had developed a very close relationship with a guy named Shaquin Alvarez, and he also lived close to the Quick Stop, and he would come in and out of the Quick Stop all the time, and that's how they met, and they became very, very close. They were making plans to get married and live happily ever after, and he kept encouraging her to leave Paul, and she said, "I'm leaving him tonight." And he had been in the store on that Wednesday. He had been in the Quick Stop. Her friend Richard confirmed that he had seen Shaquin in the store about 7 o'clock that night. He doesn't know what they talked about. He says, that was their business. I don't get into their business. And so apparently she told Shaquin that she was leaving him that night. She says, I'm going to leave him. And he says, "Don't even go home. Just leave. Don't go. Why are you going home?" "Oh, no, I got to have my things. I need my passport." And so she was going to go home, get her things, and she was going to leave. Unfortunately, she's never seen again. She probably should have followed Shaquin's advice and not gone home. He said he talked to her about 10:40 that night. The plan was still the same. She was going to leave him. Then we learned that Lisa's brother, who lives in Philadelphia, was getting text messages from Lisa. And he said they didn't make any sense. There was a lot of misspellings on the text messages. Historically, the police checked with Lisa's friends. Does she like to text? And they said she doesn't really like to text. And if she texts you, it would be something very quick. Just a few words, and sometimes she would mix up her words. So Lisa's brother's getting these texts, some that are very, very lengthy, and he's not buying that this is Lisa. So he finally decides he's going to figure out if it's Lisa or not. So he asks Lisa a question that only she would know the answer to, about some person from their childhood. And when he texts that question to her, no response. No response ever again. So he realizes this is not Lisa. So he also informs the police of this. So the police decide one of the things she had texted her brother was that she was living in Jacksonville. So the police get all of her phone records, and they find out that there's calls being made from her phone, there's texts being made from her phone, but each time her phone is being used, it is close in proximity, I'm sure they had location data, to Paul's phone. So they're thinking, Paul must be our suspect. So they developed this very bold plan. They weren't even sure this plan was legal. So they run it across the state attorney's office, and they're like, we've never done this before. And then they finally get a judge to sign off on it. And what they plan to do is to send Paul a text message from Lisa. So what they do is they go to the phone company where Lisa had her phone, and they get the phone ID, and they set up a cloned phone. So when they send the text message to Paul, it will look like it's coming from Lisa's phone. Now, won't that scare the piss out of him if he's the murderer? This was their plan. So the judge signs off on it, says it's legal, you go right ahead, and so on Thursday, November 5th, they send the text message to Paul's phone. And it says, "Just wait till I get better." Actually, it said, "Just wait till I got better." It should have, in other words, they mixed up the word, because her friend said sometimes she would mix up words. So it said, "Just wait till I got better," meaning just wait till I get better. So they thought, once Paul sees this text, he's going to do one of a few things. He's going to call the police and say, "Hey, she didn't disappear. I got a text from her." Or he's going to panic if he's the murderer. So at this point in time, Paul is staying with his mother's house. So they get multiple agencies involved. Different, Hollywood Police Department, Miramar, Miami, all surrounding. They get all these agencies involved, including a helicopter or a plane, one of those planes that can follow you around. So they sit on Paul's house, and they don't even know if he's gotten the text. They're hoping that he got the text. So a few hours after they send the text, Paul leaves the house, and he gets into a car, his mother's car, and he starts driving around. Now they're following him. And what they're doing is every place that he goes, they're writing down everywhere he goes. If he stops somewhere, they're writing that place down. And he went to a lot of different places. He goes, he starts out at Miramar. He's going all the way to Miami. He's going to Aventura. He's going to Hollywood. He's going to all these different places. And he finally, at one point, he goes back home. He leaves again. He's going to other different places. So he finally ends up at this friend's house in Miami Gardens, a woman that he worked with who had asked him to do her a favor and fix an appliance or something that she had. And so she said she was very surprised because he had stopped by earlier a few weeks earlier, and she was very surprised when he stopped by, and he had said, you know, I'm here, because she had asked him to do this a long time ago, but he stops by and he says he's here to do the thing. And she said it was really strange because one of the questions he asked me when he stopped by, you know, I have this big open field in my backyard, you know, in the back of my house, and he asked me if that area is well lit at night. And she said, no, not really. So the night that he stops there, he's just there for, you know, a few minutes, and then he leaves. So then he finally goes back home and he doesn't leave again. So they decide they're going to investigate every single place. They're going to search every single place that he's been, that he stopped on this 6-hour drive. He drove around for 6 hours. So they decide they're searching every single place. Fields, canals, whatever, homes. If they stopped at someone's house, they were interviewing those people, and they were all very cooperative, including the woman that I just described in Miami Gardens. So they're doing all this. They finally end up at this place in Miami Gardens, this woman's, and they are searching the open field in back of her house. And they send out cadaver dogs. And right away, these cadaver dogs immediately hone in on this 55-gallon barrel that was pushed up against the trees. And they're like, psh, cadaver dogs are trained just to find dead bodies. They're nothing more. A lot of canine dogs are trained for different functions. These are just dogs that are trained to find dead bodies, the smell of death. So they take that barrel to the medical examiner's office. They open it up, and it's so gruesome. It's a body of a female who has been dead for a period of time, but the barrel was sealed, so it kept her from being destroyed, the body from being destroyed by wild animals and weather. And however, it was somewhat decomposed, and they could not identify that it was Lisa because the head was missing. So again, they decide that they're going to identify her. Oh, I skipped a part. Oh my gosh. At one point, they do get a search warrant for Paul's house. And in that house, they find traces of blood underneath the vanity in the bathroom, and then some on the backsplash and some in the bathtub. So they collect that blood, but they have no DNA from Lisa because she took all of her things. There's no hairbrush, there's no toothbrush, no way to get DNA for Lisa. So they were fortunate that her daughter was in the United States. She had gone to Philadelphia to visit her uncle. They got in touch with Lisa, and she provided a DNA sample. They hired an expert in community DNA, which is like genetic genealogy, and he he looked at the DNA and compared it to the daughter's DNA and said, yes, this could very well be Serlene's close relative, with a very high percentage of certainty. So that they figured out that this was Lisa's blood. But there was also blood from an unidentified male. And up to this time, they had not had any DNA samples from Paul. They never could or asked for a search warrant to get Paul's DNA. They didn't have enough probable cause to ask for a search warrant to get Paul's DNA. So after this body is at the medical examiner's office, they decide to compare the DNA of the body to Serlene again, and of course it comes back as a match that it is Lisa's body. So sad. So sad. She had been stabbed over 30 times, and like I said, her head was cut off. So they go to Paul. They get a search warrant again for his DNA. When they show up at his mother's house, he's on the phone with his lawyer. His lawyer says, listen, just cooperate with them. They have a warrant. That warrant is for your body. You have to cooperate with them. Just go with them. They're going to take a DNA sample. Then they're going to let you go. Call me back when you get back home. And he's like, okay, cooperates. He goes down to the police. He gives the DNA. They come back home, and then he goes back home. Well, his DNA matches the unidentified male blood found in the bathroom next to Lisa's. So now they have him driving around to this very spot where this barrel is found. Now they have his DNA in the blood. They have the fact that their phones were always together when these texts are made from Lisa's phone. But they find a neighbor of Lisa and Paul. She was friends with Lisa, not Paul, but she lives across the street. And she said on Friday, October 9th, which is 2 days after Lisa goes missing, she looks out her window and she sees Paul driving this really nice car. And she's like, wow, they're doing really well. That's a very nice vehicle. Well, it's a vehicle that his mother had rented for him. Paul didn't have his own car, and his mother would rent vehicles. If he wanted to use a vehicle for something, she'd rent one for him because he was on a no rent list because he would never bring vehicles back in time. So nobody would rent to him. So he had this really nice vehicle at that point in time, and she watched him loading up these large garbage bags into the vehicle on Friday the 9th. So Saturday, the next morning, she wakes up and she looks through the blinds and she sees that his vehicle is there. And the night before, it had been backed in, which is not the way she said he usually parks his cars. It had been backed in and he was bringing the bags out and putting them in the back. Which she said, well, this time the vehicle was there again, but it was, parked the right way, facing forward. But the back door was open. Inside, she could see there was a large bag and a white cooler. But right next to the vehicle was a 55-gallon wood barrel. Yeah. And the police were also able to find out from several friends that had been in Paul and Lisa's apartment that they had seen a white barrel, a 55-gallon white barrel in their apartment. So apparently the reason that it was there is both Paul and Lisa would accumulate things, food items, clothing, whatever they would just put it in this barrel. And when the barrel got full, they would ship that over to Trinidad for their families. And that's how that was the conveyance for the stuff they were sending to the families. That had to be terribly expensive. But anyway, this is 2009. So anyway, on April 14th of 2010, Paul is arrested for the murder of Lisa Spence. It takes 5 years for this case to go to trial. It doesn't go to trial until July of 2015. And then it takes the jury just 3.5 hours to find Paul guilty of first-degree murder. He is now serving a life sentence. Yep, in Florida. Yeah. Okay. I need to read the crime calendar for you today. It's Tuesday, February 21st. We're going to do part 1 of The Mystery of the Dyatlov Pass. We're going to the UK for this one, guys. Between the late hours of February 1st and the early hours of February 2nd, 1959, something mysterious happened on the Kholat Syakhl Mountain. I'm butchering these names. It's in Russia. Something mysterious happened on the Kholat Syakhl Mountain in what was then Soviet Russia. A group of 9 experienced hikers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, led by Igor Dyatlov, cut their way out of their tent and ventured into the frigid, snowy terrain. Some were barefoot, others wearing only socks or one boot. They would not be seen alive again. Dyatlov, after whom the area is now named, had said he would telegram the group's sport club at the end of their hike, which should have been around February 12th. There was no immediate reaction when the telegram didn't arrive, as delays were common during such expeditions. However, by February 20th, the families of the missing began demanding the formation of a search and rescue team. The group's campsite was discovered on February 26th, and the bizarre and grisly talk, Rebecca. The bizarre and grisly scene surrounding it would be the topic of worldwide debate for decades to come. Tune in tomorrow for part 2 of this story. Yeah. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did enjoy it, make sure you hit that thumbs up button. Give me a like. Yes. Please consider subscribing. Also, more importantly, share this with someone who you think might enjoy listening to true crime while they craft. And also consider becoming a member of the channel. There's super chat, super thanks down below. Whatever. Have a great Tuesday. I will see you tomorrow in Crafting and Crime Daily for more of the Murdoch trial. I know as I've been speaking, Buster Murdoch is on the stand. Yeah. Gotta go. Bye.